There's a few things that I want to talk about today, and I wanted to start with a very humble title of platform engineering is eating the world, which of course is a bit of maybe it's a bit exaggerated, it's a bit of a provocation, um, but I do really see platform engineering currently hitting this like inflection point. The fastest growing segment in our community are data engineers, followed by security engineers and observability people. And so everybody's really trying to figure out, as platform engineering really is becoming the new paradigm for the enterprise and the new DevOps, this new like IT layer. Everybody's trying to figure out, how do I work with the platform engineering org? How do I work with the platform team? Should I be part of the platform team? And in fact, if you go on platformengineering.org on the blog, you'll see there are now, we're starting to tag content by persona, and we're moving past kind of, the quote unquote traditional platform engineer persona into data platform engineer, security platform engineer, and so on and so forth, right? So, um, that's very interesting, and I think that's opening up a whole set of new possibilities, both for enterprises as well as service providers. And that's kind of the theme here of this talk. Like where so we'll I'm Luca. I write Platform Weekly, and you can always unsubscribe. That's what I say. But what we'll cover today is the really the idea of this framing this platform engineering revolution. I will spend just a little bit on like the why and the what, just in case that there's always somebody in the audience that maybe is not super familiar with all the concepts that we tend to discuss here in the community. And then really, what are the challenges and opportunities, and how you can position your organization within this new framework that's really taking over most of the enterprise world really. Okay, so first, just to kind of frame the conversation, platform engineering has been compounding like crazy, right? I mean, we started out this community. I think like some of you might be aware, right? But we actually originally were part of a vendor, Humanitech, which went out to market to sell platform engineering and platform engineering solution, a platform engineering B2B SaaS, very normal. Except there was really no platform engineering market to go out to. And so we kind of had to take a step back and sort of define that space. And we did that with a community first approach, right? We started doing a few kind of, meetup, especially in EMEA, meetup events here and there. Then we launched the Slack, yada, yada. Fast forward, now it's like over 250,000 people. We just had PlatformCon 25 a couple of weeks ago. We had over 40,000 people globally virtually attending, and over 2,000 people or I think over 1,000 something people. Here it is, 1,100 people in person in New York and in London. We almost had 10,000 people at the workshops. It was crazy, right? Like really, really crazy. If you've seen my LinkedIn at all in the last few weeks, I've just been reposting what everybody's been posting about PlatformCon, but really the energy was great. And I think it really speaks to, not just the compounding of the platform engineering space as a trend broadly, but really also as a community, coming together. The energy was crazy. And so, we're looking to make this even bigger next year. But it's not just us, right? Like it's not just the community that grows. You can see this, you can see the compounding of platform engineering across other things too. If you look at Gartner, for example, which of course is kind of like the most established, vendor slash monopoly in the industry. I remember I've been working with Gartner analysts for the last 4 or 5 years. I remember when I was very happy back in 2022 when platform engineering was added. There's this, little red arrow on the left when it was added to the hype cycle for software engineering. Then it climbed it, right? If you see in 23, and then last year it already had its own hype cycle, right? With some stuff like internal developer platforms and portals and so on. And not only that, but actually infrastructure platform engineering, which is already a subset of platform engineering, it already last year was on 7 different hype cycles. So really, really crazy. And I think again speaks to just like the how crazy this thing has been compounding. And by the way, infrastructure platform engineering and if an infrastructure platform engineer is one of those personas that I mentioned earlier, right? So we have, and we'll look at that later as well during the talk. But we have already last year started talking about the difference between infra platform engineering and DevX platform engineering. But now we're really seeing this explosion of like data and security and AI platform engineering and so on. So we'll cover a little bit more about that as well. And then of course, Gartner basically said by 2026, by next year, this was like, I think like in 2023, they said it. 80% of large software engineering organizations will have some sort of platform engineering, initiative in place. And I would say this is tracking, like I would say maybe not 80% will have a platform team and a platform engineering initiative in place, but certainly at least 80%, I would say at this point are sort of aware of that. And also interestingly, and this is also something that maybe we can discuss more in the Q&A later, the hottest trend, you can see here, of course, like, top strategic trends, platform engineering, of course, is AI. And of course, AI is taking over everything. So, but, I've been speaking with Gartner and ThoughtWorks and Google for the last 2 or 3 years, and everybody was like, look, if it wasn't for AI, platform engineering would be the number one thing in enterprise today. And the interesting thing is, as AI has really just like, hit the inflection point, I think in the last 12 months or so, 12 to 18 months, especially, and it's clearly coming to the enterprise slowly, much more slowly than consumer, of course, but it is coming. I think, it's basically overshadowing / really killing a lot of other trends, right? Whereas I think when you look at platform engineering, it's really turbocharging it. So what do I mean with that? It was actually obviously, the intersection of AI and platform engineering was the hottest topic at PlatformCon this year. And you could cluster it in two segments, right? Like AI-enabled platforms and platforms for AI. And so AI-enabled platforms, of course, are, you put an LLM interface on top of your platform, and you do agentic workflows, all great stuff. But really, the important thing here to not forget is, at the end of the day, you can think of your enterprise, your org, as infrastructure and kind of bare metal, your platform, right? And then the platform is the thing that everything else sits on top of, right? Like any AI workflow, and we'll look at some refs architecture for AI and data platforms later as well. But that's at the end of the day, this is kind of like the stack that is shaping up for all enterprises. As every enterprise becomes more and more digital, you have the bare metal that you're running on, you have the platforms that are supporting everything, and then everything sits on top of that, right? So, the more AI you want to do, the better the platform needs to be, right? And so I think that becomes a very interesting kind of not a headwind, but the other wind, the one that blows into your sails, a tailwind into for platform engineer. And so just as a very quick reminder, why did platform engineering even come to place, into existence? And the reality is that, this DevOps thing was, I think, a swing of the pendulum a little bit too far towards, we went from like throwing over the fence and complete silos to, okay, now everybody does everything. That clearly doesn't scale. And the first people to realize that were, advanced engineering organizations, and so both the developer count grow 10x, as well as their cloud or general, technical estate footprint go 10x. They're like, look, I can't possibly onboard, my latest front-end engineer to an increasingly mega complex setup and expect them to understand everything and do everything end to end. So they were so the Googles, the Airbnbs, yada yada, were the first ones to realize, okay, I need to build some sort of platform layer. Otherwise, the cognitive load of developers is going to completely get out of hand, right? This is a great graphic from Daniel Bryant back at the first ever PlatformCon in 2022, where he basically shows the sort of the different tech that developers are exposed to, as well as the different app architecture going from monolith to microservices plus, and all these things. And you can see basically this area under the curve, the integral that's just this like exploding cognitive load for developers, which of course means developers are completely blocked. They're afraid of screwing things up. They don't want to touch anything. This lowers productivity and of course means that they're just waiting on their ops colleagues, which then means a ton of ticket ops, a lot of manual works, huge lack of standardization, but also security, and just like a lot of friction in the system and between these different stakeholders. And that's really what platform engineering is aiming to solve, right? And so the kind of I guess like book definition, right? Of platform engineering is as a discipline that's really about sort of taking the tech and tools that are floating around your enterprise organization today and binding them into golden paths that enable developer self-service, right? That abstract the underlying complexity for the user, right? And the user, as we will see in quote unquote traditional platform engineering, is the app developer, but you can apply the same thing to data users, right? Data scientists for a data platform. You can apply the same thing, frankly, to HR people and marketing people and whatever, right? Like I really think when I say platform engineering is eating the enterprise world, I really mean it in a sense that, as you keep going up the stack, the same principles of platform engineering are applicable to really all sorts of teams or all sorts of workflows in the enterprise. And so it's really this cultural revolution, right? That's taking over so many companies. And I think culture is a key word that's really important here. It's not just about the tech. It's really a shift in mindset, as we will see in a second. And really, frameworks are become an essential way of driving this, right? You need mental models, you need clear visualizations, you need clear ways of explaining to people how you can take all these different bits and pieces in your enterprise and bind them into this golden paths. And again, this golden paths here, we're going to focus on developers, but could really apply to anything, right? One of these frameworks that have been so successful are these reference architectures. We publish reference architectures or in collaboration actually with McKinsey at PlatformCon 23. There was a talk that we did with them, and that was like a very big sort of big first moment, I think, for the community, because until then, everybody, again, from a principal perspective, it's kind of, okay, yeah, platform engineering sounds good. DevOps is not really scaling at the enterprise scale. We need to fix some problems. What do we do? Platform engineering, okay. But then I remember, pre-reference architecture, having a conversation with people at a place like KubeCon, man, it was hard. Because nobody, everybody's like, okay, but wait, so is Backstage your platform? Is this your platform? It was very hard to like fit the pieces together. And that changed with this reference architecture. With the reference architectures, it became much more easily understood. And it was just much easier to have this conversation. And in fact, if you look at, PlatformCon 23, there was obviously just one talk that had reference architectures because that's when it was announced. So PlatformCon 24, about 20% of the talks had a type of reference architecture in them, where they, where practitioners use them as a way to show people their platform and to talk them through the business logic. Again, very important. We said it's about culture, not tech. This is not a infrastructure diagram, right? This is the business logic, effectively, of your platform, and that's really, really important. Again, because that's how you create a shared understanding and how you create momentum around your platform engineering initiative and your org transformation. And this, I mentioned earlier, this is a little sneak peek of something that's coming soon, which is a new data reference architectures for AI and data workflows. You can see how we're basically restructuring the way we think about these reference architectures to really accommodate for this brave new world of data and AI, and different users, right? So different users that might interact with your platform mostly through notebooks and co-pilots, as opposed to a portal or an IDE as traditional app devs would do, different integration delivery pipelines with, of course, ML pipelines and so on and so on and so forth. So that's an example of how. And by the way, this also follows the kind of like the 2.0 of this, which we're also going to release in the next couple of months. So stay tuned for all that. There's a lot of exciting new standards and blueprints that we're going to release from the community. But that's really, I think, an interesting representation of how the space is evolving, right? And how we need to, as new trends come up, also evolve our mental models and our visualizations and kind of blueprints for stuff. Another helpful blueprint that I just want to cover real quick is this, right? So we mentioned earlier this idea of like, as a platform engineering is a complex multiplayer game, right? You need to get every stakeholder on board, or at least like I like to kind of cite this Pareto efficiency idea. A lot of you might be familiar with the Pareto principle, which is kind of like the 80-20 idea. But the Pareto efficiency is a slight declination of that, which I find very interesting because it essentially, in kind of like layman terms, means like make some people happy and don't piss anyone off, right? And so what that means is you have you're gonna 10x the developer experience, for example, right? Which again might sound like a huge thing, a huge deal, and like, oh well, 10x is crazy. But when you think about the fact that developers are literally, in most enterprise organizations today, waiting for like 2 weeks to get like an environment set up or a database provisioned. If you lower that to like minutes and pure self-service, that is, I would say, at least a 10x. So that's possible. The problem is if your platform engineering initiative is ever perceived as worse than a net neutral, so a net negative for anybody, that somebody will become a huge blocker to your initiative, right? And so some people might be really, really happy about the work that you're doing. Some other people are going to hate you, or hate you maybe is a strong word, but they're not going to be happy, and so they're going to actively try to block you because, again, platform engineering is a big org transformation, right? And you have to treat it as such. And so you can also think of enterprises as organisms, effectively complex organisms. And like in nature, every organism really resists change, right? One way or the other. That's kind of like the default state of a lot of natural of equilibrium states, right? And so you have to consider that. And so in order to drive that profound change, you have to have your champions, your advocates, and people that are really excited. But also importantly, you should not make any enemies. And so this is where it becomes really important to think about, to map out this, different stakeholders against the structure of our platform engineering team. And as I said earlier, right, we have already seen, this is from like last year, we had already seen, this idea of like infra platform engineering, DevX platform engineering kind of evolving. But we can already take this further, right? As I was saying, you can now talk about data platform engineers and security platform engineers and reliability platform engineers and so on, and they interface with different users, right? And so this keeps growing as platform engineering really is taking over the enterprise world. We need to specialize more and more. Now, by the way, because people then ask like, oh, wait, does it mean that I can't really be a good platform engineering team if I don't have all these roles? No, of course not. There are platform teams that I work with that are like 200-300 people, in which cases usually they do have at this point, different sub teams, or at least like a couple of people that even have this as a title. Although, this is still a little bit early days, but it is coming. We're already seeing it. We have also a job board in the community so it's some interesting data points from that. But in general, it's more about the functions that you should think about covering with your platform engineering team, right? So you can also have, if you're in some cases, you're a team of like 4 or 5 people, you'll wear different hats. The important thing though is like, as you interface with yourself with different stakeholders outside of the platform team, you should really think of developing kind of like sub practices to make sure that everyone's happy effectively and that you keep driving that initiative forward, right? Okay, so now let's get to kind of like the challenges and opportunities bit, right? Which I think is where it gets very interesting. And as we said, right, there is this like cognitive dissonance, I would say, in the market right now, because on the one hand, Gartner, as we saw, tells us that like 80% of organizations will have a platform engineering initiative in place by next year. Yet, 60% of platform teams fail to get any developer adoption. 73% report that the rest of their orgs are not even aware of their platform initiative, right? It's a real challenge. And I think that really speaks to the fact that no matter how many times we go through these iterations of agile and Scrum and whatever and DevOps, like this different kind of frameworks. At the end of the day, the thing that we're still not good at, I think, as an industry is, and when I say an industry, I mean all industries really, because like we're seeing, this is platform engineering really is cross-cutting across really any sector of the economy at this point. Um, we're not good at org transformation. And I think especially when we think about engineers and engineering practices, there's too much focus on the tech and not enough on the culture bit, which is why, I really emphasize the fact that platform engineering is a cultural revolution, right? And there are a few, there are a few symptoms of that, I think, that we can break down. The first I like to call rebranded hodgepodge, right? So I think one of the challenges that I see on the field today is this idea of essentially like, okay, somebody in the management team heard about platform engineering and it's very cool, and it's what the cool new kids on the block do. So let's go do that as well. And then they basically take some DevOps teams over here and some infra teams over here and cloud odds and SRE and so on, and then just they kind of like batch them all under one um, org that's called now platform engineering. You're all called platform engineering now, and then you do platform engineering. Except nobody actually knows what platform engineering is, right? So that's the first challenge. And connected to that is the idea that ultimately the core idea of one of the core concepts of platform engineering is platform as a product, right? It's like building stuff as a product, and that's also lacking. And people just keep doing the same work they did before, and they keep approaching the same stuff as normal infrastructure work, and that's bound to fail. And that then means that there is lack of developer adoption, like we were seeing in the stats over here, and just general lack of buy-in, right? So we end up in this like death spiral of platform engineering where we don't get momentum. There's no clear vision and mission and understanding within the platform team. There is no sort of progress, right? So a lot of teams get stuck into this forever planning, and forever, and then want to try to do everything ever all at once, like the Korea movie, and don't apply best practice, don't apply minimum viable platforms, right? Frameworks, don't apply the standards from the community. They're so useful to actually keep measuring and measuring the baseline, showing the positive delta to stakeholders, and then keep iterating on that flywheel onto a successful platform engineering initiative. Instead, they get stuck. There's no shared vision. There's no momentum. There's low dev adoption, lower budgets, and you kind of spiral down into a death spiral of your platform engineering initiative, right? So how can we think about addressing those challenges? Well, first of all, let's not just rebrand ops or DevOps, because the reality is they just continue doing ticket ops, right? And continue operating as before. Because if you don't have an actual platform team that works as a product team that is developing a platform as a product, there's always the burning ticket that needs to be solved is always going to take priority over. So the problem is if I have a DevOps team that's trying to also on the side as a side quest, building a platform, that ain't gonna work. And so, of course, what's the what's the solution to that is upskilling everybody, right? Also having a platform product manager, right? So if we go back to the role down here is one of the really crucial ones to connect all the dots and glue this vision across both the platform engineering team and the other stakeholder groups. But that's really, that's a great thing to have, but I don't think is enough if there's still no shared understanding. Because your platform product, your PPM, your platform product manager is one person, right, or two people or whatever, and they're not going to be enough to actually educate and carry everyone over to this brave new world of platform engineering. If you have 30, 40 people across different teams, that's just not going to work. I've seen it too many times to think otherwise. Instead, what does work is training, right? So it's really training your team as a whole, and basically say, look, you are now you need to change your mindset from this kind of one and done 6 months infrastructure project, which is the typical kind of DevOps infra cloud ops approach to things, into, well, this is a multi-year endeavor, right, that we're embarking on with this platform that we're building, and we really need to think about it that way. Especially in the enterprise, we're talking about 3, 5+ years, right? And the customer or the end user of this product are the app devs, who are our internal customers as the platform engineering team, right? That perspective shift might sound trivial almost, but it's something that a lot of DevOps teams and a lot of existing teams really struggle with. And of course, I think the interesting thing beyond these two core principles is once you look at your platform as a product, automatically all this, universe of product management best practices and basics just of memes, right, unlocks, right? So now you can use user research, you can have a product roadmap, you can do product marketing, because again, you should think of yourself as a platform team, effectively as a startup team that is driving adoption of your product within your total addressable market, which is your the total size of your app dev teams and engineering organization effectively, right? So this is number one: transform your platform team. Second is, as I mentioned, as I touched briefly on earlier, this idea of too many people, I think, look at platform engineering as a tech challenge. And really, like our friends at Google like to say, is a socio-technical challenge. So of course, it is also a technical challenge, and there are REST architectures and tools that we need to think about and so on. But I yet have to see one single platform initiative fail because of a tech reason, because they picked Postgres over something else, or this tool over that tool, or whatever, right? The reason why they fail is because, as we've seen earlier, there's no developer adoption, there's no buy-in from executives and other stakeholders, and so on. And so again, the way you should think about it is as a cultural transformation, where really what you're optimizing for is driving standardization and automation across all your workflows, all your teams, right? And really creating business value from that. And both of these require cultural change, right? And so you have to align stakeholders and get buy-in through frameworks like the minimum viable platform framework, through frameworks like reference architectures to paint a shared vision for the end architecture, through this kind of org chart visualizations and frameworks and blueprints to think about how different teams work with one another. And then finally, one other thing that I just wanted to mention, because I think it's quite interesting, is champion dependency, right? And how I think and this is true of platform engineering, but really of most org transformations and implementations, I guess, as well, at large scale within an enterprise. That you have to sort of at some point switch over from champion led to exec led, right? And this is something that we see a lot. Like the champion, you do need the champion for sure. That's the person that kickstarts the whole thing. That's the person that has enough, brand equity and cachet within the organization to drive change, right? And to get the first few stakeholders aligned, right? And then you go through these motions of MVP, minimum viable platform, and then production readiness platform, and then sort of like after that full scale adoption. And what we see a lot of times is like in the more mature organizations, at some point, let's say you have 10,000 developers, right? And you have a 30% adoption rate. So 3,000 developers have adopted your platform. I mean, that's by no means a failure, right? That's a success, in fact, right? And in fact, what that means is the champion gets promoted, the champion gets poached from another company. At some point, these people don't stay in the company forever, right? In some cases, they do, but you certainly don't want to have this huge person dependency, right? Key person dependency. And so what the successful platform engineers should do is transition from this champion-led motion to full executive buy-in that now top down say, okay, this is actually great for us. We have enough data points. There's enough momentum after this. We're going to be responsible for actually driving this end to end to actually get full adoption, which is never like, of course, 100%, except for a few kind of like rare cases. But it's actually what gets it, to 50, 60, 70+%, right? Okay. So now that we've kind of really mapped out the lay of the land and kind of where the industry is right now, and I think where the opportunities are from like a growth of the entire space perspective, what that means for the enterprise, how can you benefit and how should you think about positioning your organization, right? Which is kind of like one of the core themes of this talk. Well, the way we think about our ecosystem, for example, right, is kind of this like multi kind of like onion layered thing, right? We have our kind of community at the core with all the destinations, these webinars that you're attending, platform content I mentioned earlier, platform weekly that I write, the platform engineering university, which is like a very big kind of like push that we're doing from a content creation perspective together with a lot of external partners. And then really, if you think about the stakeholders, the different constituencies, you have a lot of individuals, you have a lot of vendors also, but also mostly a lot of enterprises, right? So what tends to happen a lot of times is, we see, we do these courses, right? We have the certified practitioner, certified professional, and a lot of people take those courses, and then normally you have a platform product manager, a head of platform, a VP, DevX, whatever it is, or even leaders within service providers, right? Like a platform engineering chapter leader at Accenture, at ThoughtWorks, whatever, and they take the course and go, hold on a second, I actually need my entire team, my entire org to go through this, and that's where we started developing then this idea of like certifying organizations beyond just individuals, right? And that's kind of the core idea here, right? Of hosting the certified team trainings, but also being able to certify service providers and training providers as the entire ecosystem scales, right? And so the benefit of a certified team training, right, is that you actually do something that you get something very bespoke to your own organization, right? And we actually come on site with you and host these things to really help you, as I said earlier, right, get this shared vision, this shared understanding of what your platform team can achieve, right? And a lot of it is, if you have attended Platform Con, there's actually an entire track, an entire room that was called platform therapy, because really this is how we think about a lot of these sessions. A lot of times is, you work with extremely experienced people, right? Like people that have been in DevOps and cloud for like 15, 20 years. But still struggle with coordination across teams, still struggle with this platform as a product mindset, with looking at developers as their own internal customers. And this is where we come in and kind of like really help you setting that baseline for everybody and make sure that your entire platform engineering organization, in the case of Fiserv, we're talking about 250 plus people, really is on the same page and then can drive from there. And we do similar work with folks at ThoughtWorks, for example, where we first train their consultants, and then actually enable them, right? Do a matchmaking essentially between service providers and organizations, because of course a lot of organizations after the training, a lot of these enterprises over here, right? After the trainings, they're like, okay, this is great. Can you help me? Can you, and we also provide advisory services. So we normally keep staying with them to keep driving the momentum. But then they also have, needs for actual services support, which of course we don't provide. Though we've all built a lot of platforms, but it's not something that we want to do as a service. And this is where we do the matchmaking with the service providers, right? So as the ecosystem keeps growing, I think really there's like a huge opportunity, both from an enterprise angle, right? And especially a service provider, right? Like training providers is something that will come later as this keeps maturing and as we want to scale out our kind of educational offering. But if you think of yourself really just within this like large market, forget about the community, just broadly about the platform engineering in the platform engineering market, right? You know, you'll see, I think, it's important to realize that as an enterprise, this is a huge opportunity to get ahead of competition. And you need to get that first core team aligned, and then the other stakeholders in your organization aligned to really drive this org transformation, which is really what's going to set you apart from the competition. And if you're a service provider, you need to understand that, this is a golden era for you, because platform engineering, as we said, is a culture transformation. It requires a lot of hand-holding. It requires a lot of consultants essentially that come in and help you through this transformation and help you drive across these different stakeholders. So this is really where we're seeing, and I think it's very interesting where we're seeing it going. I think it's super interesting because really we are at this inflection point for the marketing for the ecosystem across many different dimensions. As we said, the different persona, the specialization of platform engineering, but also really of, I'm very invested in making sure that, enterprises get the support they need to keep growing, and service provider, also get the opportunity to help them do that, right? Because this is how we're going to advance as an ecosystem together. And I think everybody can benefit from it depending on which type of organization you are. Okay. And I think that's it. Thank you. And questions. I think we still have some time.
Yes. Okay, guys, share with us the questions either on the chat or the Q&A. Let's see. Let's give it a minute.
Yeah, and really, I'd be curious, like, if there's anybody, here, if it's more enterprise folks, like, we can go more the enterprise route. We kept, like, when we looked at the kind of like at the everybody that registered for this, there was really kind of like a 50-50 split between service providers and consultancies and sort of enterprise. So I just wanted to make sure that I covered both bases. But if there's, anyone that's more interested in any of the directions, I'm happy to kind of go deeper into that, or answer any other questions you might have about anything else we covered today.
Okay, I see we have one question from Brian. Do you encourage teams to think about the platform as one product or potentially as multiple products? For example, you talked about multiple types of platforms.
So do you encourage teams to think about the platform as one product? Yeah. That's a great question. I think the answer is both, and I'll justify it. So I think you have to. I think if you look at the way I try and learn is always as a heuristic. What's worked for me is always look at because I get to speak to like many platform teams, and always try to learn from the best performing ones, right? Top performers. And if you look at how top performing orgs are thinking about this, they're thinking about, let's take, for example, the case of like data platforms that I shared earlier, right? I would say in the vast majority, like 99.9% of cases right now, these are two completely separate silos, right? You have data platform, you have data over here, right? And data scientists and ML ops engineers and so on. And you have, traditional SDLC, app devs, platform engineers, ops, cloud ops, DevOps over here. And they don't talk to each other. Or they don't talk to each other as much. And I think the interesting, and so I think when you look at top performers, they're already thinking about this as just one unified layer. They're not thinking about, well, there's a data platform over here, and there's a uh, SDLC platform over here. They're already thinking it was one unified layer, which of course, if you think about it, makes sense because software engineering is just like a progressive history of abstractions built on top of each other, and platforms are nothing else but one of those abstractions. And so, of course, as you get two abstractions on the same layer, basically, right, the next abstraction basically abstracts both of them, right? So that's kind of like what we are seeing. However, I would say for the vast majority of cases, we're really not there yet, and we're really still trying to figure it out. So even if you look at that at the data reps architecture that I shared earlier, really it's not it's not really complete yet, right? This is kind of really like a V1 that we wanted to put out. I think there's a lot of good work in there and a lot of good insights, and this will come with a 30, 40 pages plus white paper. So there's a lot of work, there's a lot of data, but it's still like a V1. We're still trying to figure out how do we bridge this gap, right? And so, to answer your question, I think like, eventually you should always think of it as one product. I think realistically, there is a transition period in between especially as the platform grows, that you effectively have multiple platforms that then need to be rolled up into one. But I think if we think just like broadly just about, app devs as the end user, it should just be one platform.
Thank you. I see we have more questions. Can Backstage alone support in platform engineering in combination with GitHub Actions, or a platform orchestrator is also needed to achieve an IDP?
Yeah. So I mean, I think the TLDR in this is very simple. It's just like how much control do you want and how mature your setup is, right? Like I think Backstage, which is just like a very simple, front end essentially to your platform. It's not your platform, right? It's very important to understand. It's just like a front end. A bunch of GitHub actions underneath is good enough for very simple use cases. The problem is, I think, with that setup is that in the enterprise, you're very quickly get beyond those simple use cases into more complex business logic. And then you need a native platform engineering solution to handle that complexity, right? And that's usually what platform orchestrator and more advanced platform backends come into play. And so it's really about maturity, right? I think if you're a smaller team, and you're looking at very simple use cases, something like a Backstage and some GitHub actions, kind of like spaghetti logic might cut it, but you're going to very quickly grow into a world of pain of a lot of configuration files, both app configs and infra config files just floating around, all calling one another. It's impossible to version, it's impossible to debug, and it's just impossible to scale, right? So you're kind of back to square one in a way, with the same DevOps issues, right? And so you've been doing now platform engineering for a year. You have your Backstage, you have some GitHub actions, and you still can't scale. You still don't get developer adoption. So that might be the challenge.
Perfect. Thank you. So next question. Large enterprises usually already have existing teams and tool sets. How do you start to embed platform engineering? Do you create net new or evolve existing teams and tooling?
Yeah, it's a great question, Sean. And I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. You have to, I think, um, make sure that whether you take it from existing teams, right, and really reskill them, upskill them, and retrain them, or you do net new, I think usually what I've seen is just like it's always brownfield, like you say, like you're pointing out, right? Like there's always existing stuff, existing teams, existing infra, existing tool stack. You can't just, it's not like, we're not working greenfield here. So sorry, you need to acknowledge, I think, that reality, but that also doesn't prevent you from bringing in new people. I think you definitely, it's definitely great to have like a platform leader or capital, whether it's a head of platform or a platform product manager that has, been there, done that at another org, and then combine it. I think like the reality is usually just a combination of like a couple new people coming in to lead usually, and then upskilling the existing teams.
Perfect. Have you found enterprises that have a platform engineering team yet no IDP? Perhaps they use CI/CD with share IAC and share pipelines for self-serve or infra. Do you see organizations not needing Backstage or another IDP with UI and instead building that platform engineering into the normal tools already in place?
You see orgs not needing backstage. Yeah, so I mean, yes, the answer is yes. As I said earlier, there's a lot of cases of people taking existing teams and just rebranding them, and then those teams just keep doing the same thing that they were doing before. Some CI/CD, some IAC, right? Um, um, in some cases, they end up actually building platforms already, right? Like there's a lot of DevOps team also they are doing platform engineering already, basically, right? I think the point though is you need to really make sure that you are being intentional about it. I think there's this great quote that's like, if you don't build your platform, it will build itself. The problem is with the self-built platform is that you're probably not going to like it eventually, or it's going to create problems down the line and so on, right? So I think it's very important to be intentional about it, have a very clear target reference architectures, like the ones that we looked at, but also realize that you need to get there step by step. So it is okay to start somewhere, get those initial wins, and then kind of go from there. But again, just because it's a second question that were, mentions backstage, it's important to say that as building a platform is like building any other application. You have a backend, you have a front end, you have very clear best practices that apply to things. So start from the backend. That's where your business logic resides, and then grow your way into the front end. That's a much more, I think, sustainable way of building a platform and rolling it out. It's also a much more guaranteed way to success, to platform engineering success, because you're actually going to solve the problems, which is, if you look at the problems for developers and ops teams and so on right now today, they're mostly around app configs and infra configs and workflows. It's not about, scaffolding a new service. Like, maybe if you're Spotify and that's why they built Backstage, um, if you're a big streaming company, Netflix, like you end up like spinning up services like crazy every day. I don't know. But what I know is that if you're like 99% of other companies, you don't. And so that's actually not the right starting point, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Tools like ServiceNow have both PaaS and SaaS
Pass and
capabilities.
SaaS capability. Yeah.
As yes, inbuilt using various built-in models. How to enhance platform engineering adoption for such implementations? Is data modeling and
Yeah.
CSDM answers to this?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think, yes, right. So I definitely think that like data modeling, plays a big part in there. Um, in general, it's kind of like what I was talking about earlier, right? Like you need to, when you're thinking about, the data world and the buffer engineering world, you need to figure out, okay, how do I bridge the gap? And there, I think this is kind of like one of the things, that we discuss in the in the data platform engineering white paper and reference architectures, there are a lot of trade-offs um, that you just need to make, right? And this is where um, I always think of, I think one of the heuristics that I think are helpful for platform engineering teams is this idea of like, last mile optimization. Like I really think of platform engineering as this like broad basket of both open source and commercial tooling. And, ServiceNow is a commercial example of that. And of course, as PE grows and becomes this like PE plus plus that I like to talk about, is that sort of set of tools, both open source and vendors, also grows, of course, right? But then the value of you as a platform team is really to take that basket and then glue it into stuff that makes sense for your organization and really figure out what those last mile trade-offs and last mile tweaks um, are that make sense to you. Because I've been both an open source maintainer or something like Score, as well as build products for Humanitech, which is a vendor. Um, and the reality is like neither as a open source person nor as a vendor product team, right? You can also have a lot of users and a lot of customers, and you're basically constantly building a minimum common denominator that's trying to like satisfy everybody, which of course has a lot of value, right? That's SaaS has a lot of value because you will have seen a lot more problems, and you can do much better pattern matching than individual organizations that are solving their problems. But at the end of the day, there are particular problems that are specific to you, and so I think all of those questions just go back to like you just need this is where we kind of like we can also come in, or like we come in with service providers and so on. Like that's the point. It's like you have to sit down and map out that Rex architecture, and really make sure and how you get there, and make sure that those are the right architectural and technical and social technical decisions for your organization.
Okay, I have a comment here connected to what were you saying. If you could give us one cheat code to be successful in selling this to our executives, what would that be?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think it's like anything else, to be honest. Like you just need to figure out what they care about, right? So the I think the mistake that a lot of platform teams that I see make is they try to tell the same story to everybody, but everybody speaks a different language essentially, right? So if you go to the developers and you tell them about, we're going to cut time to market and increase security, they don't care. What they care about is waiting times, right? Like I'm stuck waiting for 2 weeks for this damn like environment. It'd be great to get it in 5 minutes, in full self-service. Um, so so when you present your platform engineering initiative to them, that's how you position it. When you position it to execs, if you talk about waiting times, they also don't care. What they care about is like whatever it is. If you're a public company, it's usually on a quarterly basis. If you're a private company, maybe it's like a little bit longer, right? But they have this like broad initiatives that they care about, right? It might be employee retention. It might be my bottom line, my top line. It might be security, right? I don't want to be the next CIO like my friend last month that was like on that security magazine because of a breach, right? So it might be security. So whatever that is, I think it's important to figure out what that thing is. And then the great thing about platform engineering, frankly, is that it's a shape-shifting thing, right? You can actually mold that story to fit in, to attach it to whatever that priority is, right? So if it's security, well, platform engineering does drive security by design across your workflows. That's why security teams usually don't really block platform engineering initiatives. Um, if it's about developer experience, it's great. It may improve developer experience, right? So it's really about first understanding who you're talking to, and then talk to them the right way.
Thank you. Luca, you've referred to the product owner role being key to successful platform engineering. But thinking back to your talk at PlatformCon, I think you expressed concern that they are scarce and hard to find. How do you see this being solved? Do you think it's an easy transition for a regular product manager to move into a platform product role, or is there a more structured path into that role becoming clear as PE measures, my measures, sorry.
Yeah. So I think there is two ways of looking at this question, which is a great question, by the way, Will, because I really think, this is the number one thing that is holding back platform engineering as a space broadly, is the lack of product people and this product mindset that I was talking about, right? Um, because it's also kind of like a tautology a little bit, right? It's like platform engineering is about product management, so there's not enough product thinking. Um, but so there's two ways to answer this, right? So on an individual level, I definitely think it's totally possible to upskill yourself into a platform product manager. I would say general these are TPMs, right? Technical product managers. You do need to have like a strong understanding of Kubernetes and infrastructure as code and Terraform and GitOps and cloud stuff and like all sorts of things. Like you have to know what you're talking about because you're gonna talk to people that have like 15, 20 years experience in this stuff, and they're gonna they're gonna immediately stop listening to you if the moment they realize you're full of shit or you don't really know your stuff. um so that's one thing. But I think like once you have that technical understanding, then these best practices that we talked about are definitely something that are universal, as I said, and can be applied to anything beyond also an engineering organization. And definitely something that can be so all of it can be learned both on the hard skills and the soft skills. But the Venn diagram of that is of people that have both is not that big because to be able to be like a good communicator that is able to, like we said, go to execs and talk to execs, but also talk to app devs, but also talk to 20 plus years experience infrastructure engineers is it requires being a good communicator and at the same time having a very good technical understanding of stuff, right? So that's the thing where like as an industry I feel like if we have to rely on magically 30, 40,000 of those unicorns to just show up and help drive all the platform engineering initiatives across the top 20, 30,000 enterprises that are out there, good luck. I think it's that's not like I wouldn't want to be on that side of the bet. So I think what you're much better off doing is, and here I'm zooming back out from the kind of like large scale, from the individual to the large scale. Um, I think you're much better off, raising all boats, right? And that's where that's why I'm so passionate about the work that we do in the community around courses and trainings, because that's really is, I think, instilling a baseline product best practice understanding across your team and make sure that you have this like shared understanding and shared vision. And I think that's really your 80/20. That already comes a really long way. Of course, it's great if you also can have that unicorn figure of the product manager that drives the initiative. And of course, you need strong leadership and executive support. But I think already ensuring, because the other way around is the 20/80, I think, like having, as I said earlier, having like this great figure that comes in, but then you have like 40 people that have no idea what this person is talking about. It's going to be extremely painful for this person to, you know, because again, they're product manager, they're not like a trainer, right? So like, and they don't have like a fully developed program and yada yada. So like, you have to combine both of those things. But I really believe that as an industry, the answer for us is raising all boats and educating everybody and upskilling everybody. Oh, and I think we are at time with that. Do we want to do one more?
Sure. Do you wanna try
Let's do the
any?
last one.
Have
I'll
a
I'll
few.
pick. I'll pick.
Yeah.
Um, So I'll just be unfair and pick the last one, but Brian. So is platform engineering a compelling career path for PMs? It seems like there could be a lower ceiling than in market-facing product management. I think there's a higher ceiling. um, um, and that's because exactly what I just explained, right? So I think it's harder. I also think, though, Brian, you are touching on something that's interesting, which is another reason why there's a shortage of PPMs, of good PPMs in the industry, is that the good product managers tend to be put on external facing products by management, right? Because the internal internal facing stuff and internal initiatives are often deprioritized vis-a-vis revenue generating stuff essentially, right? Um, However, I think in a world of increased automation, increased AI, yada yada, that all relies on that platform. I think this is going to change, and I think the golden standard will be internal product marketing, but also product management for these large platform initiatives. But as I said, I think it's the ceiling is still pretty high. It's tough. It's a tough job.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Luca. Thanks everyone for joining us. Remember, you will be getting a link for the recording, so no worries about that. And well, have an amazing rest of the day. Thank you guys. Bye
Thank you,
bye.
everybody.